What would you do if you found a half-frozen stranger in the middle of a killing storm, and saving her meant risking your own life? Luke Callahan had no answer, only instinct. And instinct was the reason he was about to change his entire world without knowing it. The blizzard in the Montana foothills was not just a storm. It was a white wall that swallowed sound, light, and hope. Snow whipped sideways like a blade, cutting into Luke's coat as he rode his mare, Bess, through the endless white mess. He had lived through many winters out here, but this one felt like a living thing trying to bury him. Luke was in his 30s, a quiet rancher with hands hardened by rope burns and scars he never talked about. He lived miles from Bozeman, on a lonely spread of stubborn land. Out here, a man either made peace with silence or lost his mind. Luke had made peace long ago. He had just finished checking his cattle, what was left of them. He had lost calves to the cold. A yearling had drifted over. He could not bring them back, only ease their suffering. He tossed what feed he had left beneath the windbreak and turned toward home. His body ached from the cold, and his breath froze in his beard. He was thinking only of his fire, his coffee, and the four walls waiting for him. Then Bess stopped. She stiffened, ears flat, snorting into the wind, refusing to move another inch. Luke frowned, rubbing her neck. "It's nothing, girl. Just the storm," he muttered. But she sidestepped, nervous, her breath coming fast. Luke narrowed his eyes and peered into the swirling white world around him. At first he saw nothing but wind and snow. Then a dark shape appeared, strange and wrong against the storm. He slid off Bess and pushed through the knee-deep drifts. Every step felt like a fight. When he reached the shape, his heart lurched. It was a fine carriage flipped onto its side, one wheel snapped clean off, splintered wood sticking through the snow. Silk dresses, frozen stiff, fluttered like trapped birds in the icy wind. A horse lay nearby, locked in the snow, legs pointing skyward. Someone had survived. Luke spotted faint drag marks leading away. His chest tightened. Whoever had crawled from the wreck had little time left. He followed the trail 20 yards until he found a small, dark shape buried in a drift. A woman. She was lying face down, her body half covered by snow. He knelt and rolled her over. Her skin was blue-white. Ice clung to her lashes. Her dress was fine wool, torn straight through by the cold. Her body was cold as stone. Luke ripped off a mitten and pressed 2 shaking fingers to her neck. Nothing. He pressed harder. A faint pulse fluttered like a bird's wing. "You're still with me," he muttered, his voice rough in the storm. "All right then. Let's get you home." He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her thin body. The cold knifed into his chest instantly, stealing his breath. She weighed almost nothing when he lifted her. Her limbs were stiff, like frozen sticks. Getting her onto the saddle was a fight. Bess spooked. But Luke soothed her with the last calm voice he had left. He got the woman on the horse, then climbed up behind her. He pulled her tight against him, pressing his heat into her, hoping it would be enough. The ride back to the cabin felt like a battle. The storm clawed at him. His shirt was too thin for this cold. He bowed his head over the woman's frozen hair, praying silently that his cabin still stood. When the cabin finally rose out of the white darkness, Luke almost fell from the saddle in relief. He dragged both of them inside and slammed the door shut. The sudden quiet made his ears ring. He laid her before the cold hearth and worked fast. He built a fire with shaking hands until flames snapped to life. The light showed her face clearly for the first time. She was young, delicate, too fine for this wild land, and nearly dead. He cut away her frozen boots and stockings. Her fingers were waxy and white. Her clothes were soaked through. He hesitated before cutting the laces of her ruined coat and underlayers, but she needed warmth, not manners. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned. He poured a few drops of whiskey into her mouth. She coughed weakly. A good sign. He rubbed her hands and feet with melted snow, then with his own rough palms. He worked for hours, fighting for her life while the storm howled outside like a living monster. By dusk, some color returned to her face, faint and fragile, but real. Luke sat in his chair, drinking thick black coffee, watching her breathe. Then she gasped. Her eyes flew open, blue and wide with fear. She scrambled back, clutching the blankets to her chest. "Easy now," Luke said softly, holding his hands out. "You're safe. Name's Luke Callahan. This is my cabin." She stared at him, trembling. "Where? What happened?" "I found you in the snow, near a wrecked carriage. You were about gone." She swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "My name is Anna." Luke's eyes narrowed. He knew a lie when he heard one. But he didn't push. "Rest," he said. "Storm's got us trapped for a while." She held the blankets tight, her eyes darting around his small cabin, taking in the rough wooden walls, the rifle above the door, and the large, quiet man who had carried her from the edge of death. Two strangers in one cabin. A blizzard outside, and secrets already forming between them. The blizzard didn't stop. It screamed around the cabin like it wanted inside, shaking the single glass window until it rattled. Inside, the fire burned hot, but the air between Luke and the woman who called herself Anna was tight and tense, full of questions neither dared to ask. She sat on his bunk, wrapped in his blankets, her dark hair still damp from the melted snow. Luke moved around the room in slow, careful motions, feeding the fire, checking the kettle, trying not to stare. But how could he not? She didn't belong in a snowstorm, or on a broken trail, or in the middle of nowhere with a man like him. She looked like the kind of woman who belonged in clean rooms with velvet curtains and soft carpets. But here she was. "You feeling steady enough for broth?" he asked gently. She nodded, clutching the blanket tighter around her chest. He handed her the tin cup. She held it awkwardly, her hands shaking from cold and nerves. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. "You're alive. That's what matters." But her eyes, blue and sharp even in the low light, kept moving around the cabin, studying every inch like she needed to know her surroundings. She wasn't just scared, she was alert, watching the door, listening to the wind, waiting. Luke noticed. "You ain't just lost from a broken carriage," he said quietly. Her fingers froze on the cup. But she didn't answer. Hours passed. By morning the storm had worsened. Snow pressed against the window like a living thing. Luke went outside long enough to check the animals and came back covered in frost, his beard white with ice. When he closed the door, he sighed deeply. "We're stuck here. Days, maybe more." A look of fear passed over her face, not fear of him, but fear of what waited outside this valley. She turned her head away. I was traveling to Bozeman." "In a fine carriage?" Luke asked, raising a brow. "With silk trunks and a dead guard?" Her breath hitched. "How do you know?" She whispered. "You talk in your sleep," Luke answered, his voice calm. "Said a name last night. Langley. Said someone took everything." She went white, her lips trembling. "No," she said quickly. "You misunderstood. Please. I don't want trouble." Luke didn't push, but he felt it, a weight settling deep in his chest. Trouble wasn't coming. Trouble was already here. On the second night, as the wind cracked against the cabin, she finally spoke. "There were men on the trail," she whispered. "3." I ran. The storm took me. I thought they followed. Luke leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "Why would men shoot at you?" She hesitated too long. "I don't know," she said. He didn't call her out, but her lie hung heavy in the warm cabin. Later, when the fire burned low and Luke sat mending a broken strap, she stared at him across the room. "You saved me," she said softly. He looked up. "Storm would have killed anyone. You were just in its way." "That isn't what I mean." Her eyes held something deeper, something raw. "You saved me." Luke swallowed, unsure how to answer. He'd lived most of his life alone. Praise didn't fit with the man he was. "I did what any decent man would," he muttered. "No," she whispered. "No decent man goes out in a blizzard that strong. Only someone stubborn or someone with a good heart." Luke looked away, finishing the strap with stiff fingers. He didn't feel like a man with a good heart. Not after all the things he'd done. Not after what he'd run from. Night fell. He was about to settle on the floor near the door, the safest place to guard the cabin, when he heard Anna breathing fast, almost in panic. He turned toward her. "You all right?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes were wide, staring at the fire, but seeing something far beyond it. Her body trembled under the blankets. "Anna," he said again, rising to his feet, despite the stiffness in his limbs. She didn't hear him. She whispered, voice broken, "They took it. They took everything. The ranch, Father." Luke froze. The ranch. He knew the word wasn't small. And the way she said Father, it was grief, but also fear. He put a hand on her shoulder. "Anna," he said firmly, "wake up." Quote. She jolted up with a cry, slamming back against the wall, eyes wild. "No, don't touch me. Don't take me back." "It's me," Luke said gently, backing away with his hands open. "Luke, you're safe." Her breathing slowed. She blinked, the nightmare fading. Tears gathered in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. I didn't want you to see that." Luke crouched down a few feet from her. "Storm's rough," he murmured. "Makes the mind run places it shouldn't." "It wasn't the storm," she said, shaking her head. "It was real." Luke didn't speak. He waited. And finally her voice cracked. "My name isn't Anna." He didn't flinch. He'd known. "What is it then?" he asked calmly. She hesitated, fighting the truth. "Victoria," she whispered at last. "Victoria Langley." Luke froze. Langley, he knew that name. Everyone in the territory knew it. It meant power, land, and danger. The largest ranch in Montana. She looked at him with broken eyes. "They killed my guard. They ruined my carriage. They want my land. And they will follow me anywhere." Quote. Luke stood slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to something harder, something determined. "You're safe here," he said, voice low and steady. "Storm's not letting anyone in or out. Not for days." But in his gut, Luke felt the first warning of the trouble coming for them both. Danger didn't care about snow. And the storm outside was nothing compared to the one heading straight for his cabin. The storm finally stopped. The silence afterward was thick and heavy. Snow lay in deep white waves across the valley, glowing blue under the early morning sun. Luke stood in the doorway, staring at the drifts that reached the eaves of his cabin. He had lived through many winters, but this one had carved something cold into his bones. Behind him, Victoria stepped forward, wrapped in his blanket, her dark hair loose over her shoulders. She looked pale but steadier than she had the day before, stronger. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's dangerous," Luke replied, "and it's hiding things." He meant more than wolves. He meant men. Victoria stayed close behind him as he dug out the door and checked the animals. Her eyes stayed on the tree line, watching every shadow. When they returned inside, she sat near the fire, and Luke poured her more coffee. "You worried," she said. He didn't deny it. Storm kept everyone out. "But now? Tracks will show easy in this snow. If anyone's hunting you, they'll find their way in." Victoria's hands tightened around the cup. "You think they'll come?" "I know they will," Luke said. She lowered her eyes. "Because of my name." "No," Luke said. "Because they think you're alone." A long moment passed. Then Luke made a decision. "I'm going to scout the ridge," he said. Victoria stood so fast, the blanket slipped from her shoulders. "No, not today. Not with all that snow. You're already tired. I need to know what's out there. If it's safe, if they're close." She stepped toward him, fear written across her face. "Luke," her voice shook, "just stay." He paused at the door. For a heartbeat, he considered it. Staying. Ignoring the danger, letting the world disappear behind the snow. But then he saw again the dead horse, the splintered carriage, the fear in Victoria's eyes when she whispered her real name. "I'll be back," he said gently. He stepped outside. The cold hit him sharp and hard, but he kept moving, guiding Bess through the deep drifts. The valley had changed overnight. The storm had erased paths, swallowed fences, and buried everything in clean white, except tracks. Tracks that did not belong to him. Luke froze when he spotted them. 6 sets of horse prints, half filled with drifting snow but recent. They led toward the pass. His jaw tightened. He followed them far enough to see a dark line of riders moving through the lower valley. 6 men on horseback, struggling through the snow, heading straight toward his cabin. He didn't stay to study them. He didn't need to. He knew what they were. He turned Bess around and rode hard, pushing the mare through the soft, heavy snow. His breath fogged the air, his hands numb on the reins. The cold was nothing compared to the dread hammering in his chest. When he reached the cabin, he pounded on the door. Victoria opened it with wide, terrified eyes. "What is it?" Quote. Luke dropped a leather tag onto the table. It was small, stiff with frost, stamped with a name he already hated. Morgan. He looked at her. "Tell me the truth," Luke said, his voice low. "Tell me who's coming for you." She swallowed, her face pale. He was my father's foreman," she whispered. "His name is Silas Morgan." Luke stared. Foreman. Danger clicked into place like a loaded gun. "He believes the ranch should be his," she said. "He wants my land. He wants everything." Luke took a slow breath. "How far will he go?" Quote. Her voice cracked. "He already killed 2 men to get to me, so he'll kill anyone." Luke didn't blink. "He won't get you." She looked up at him with fear and something like trust mixed together. "Luke, what are we going to do?" He grabbed his rifle, checking the barrel. "We're gonna fight." Night came fast. Luke barricaded the window with the heavy table. Victoria loaded cartridges with shaking fingers, her breath fast and shallow. Every sound outside made her jump. Every gust of wind made her heart pound. "Stay low," Luke told her. "Stay behind the wall. Don't fire unless I tell you." She nodded, clutching the revolver with both hands. Then the horses came, crunching snow, muffled voices. And finally, "Callahan!" a man shouted outside. "We know you got the girl. Send her out and you walk away." Victoria's blood turned cold. Luke stayed silent. The man laughed. "Willing to die for a stranger, Callahan? She ain't worth it." Luke spoke then, his voice deep and steady. "She's not coming out." A sharp pause. Then gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into the cabin walls, shaking the logs. Victoria screamed and flattened herself behind the woodpile. Luke fired through the small loophole he had carved in the logs. One man fell in the snow with a cry. The others shouted, panicked, "He got Jeb! Spread out!" The gunfight was fast and brutal. Morgan's men rushed the door. Luke shot one at close range, slammed the door shut, and barred it again. Bullets ripped through the walls. Snow and splinters rained down. Victoria reloaded shakily, handing him another rifle. "Here, Luke, please! Stay down!" The attack felt endless. Smoke filled the cabin. Luke's arm throbbed as he fired again and again. Victoria crawled beside him, terrified but brave, keeping him supplied with ammunition. Finally, after more gunfire and shouting, silence fell. Then, Morgan's angry voice cut through the night. "You hear me, Callahan? This ain't over. We'll come back with more men. You'll freeze in there. You'll starve. The girl dies either way." Horses retreated. The valley went quiet. Luke slumped against the wall, breathing hard, smoke swirling around him. Victoria crawled toward him, shaking. "Luke, are they gone?" "For now," he whispered. She saw the blood then. His arm, torn open by a bullet. Blood soaked through his sleeve. "Luke, your arm! Oh no, no, no! Sit down!" He tried to brush it off, but his knees buckled. She caught him as best she could, dragging him toward the fire. She tore open the sleeve, gasping at the deep wound. Her hand shook, but she stitched it up anyway. Slow, careful, desperate. He hissed in pain, but didn't pull away. When she finished, she was breathing as hard as he was. "Luke, she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved me." "No," he murmured, his eyes heavy. "We saved each other." Then something changed in the air. Her hands were still holding his arm. His face was inches from hers. The storm outside had nothing on the storm inside that small cabin. Victoria leaned closer, breath trembling. Luke didn't pull away. Their lips met in a kiss that was raw, fierce, and full of the fear they had just survived. Two strangers brought together by a blizzard. Two hearts bound by danger. Two lives changed forever in the glow of a burning fire. When they finally pulled apart, they were both shaking, not from cold, from everything else. Outside, the valley lay silent and endless. Inside, Luke and Victoria held on to the only warmth they had left. Each other.